ShowRatings.tv Pilot Roundtable, a Southgate Media Group podcast. My name is Kyle Tremblay, and I'm the editor-in-chief at ShowRatings.tv, a user-driven television review website. Visit us online at www.showratings.tv and follow us on Twitter at ShowRatingsTV. Our pilot tonight is NBC's new imported comedy, Welcome to Sweden. According to NBC's website, from executive producers Greg and Amy Poehler comes the tale of one man's immigration to Sweden to start a new life with the woman he loves. Here to talk about Welcome to Sweden is my fellow editor at ShowRatings.tv, making her return to the podcast, Blair Knight Graves. Welcome back.
Hello.
Oh, wow. I was going to say, what's the over-under on one of us attempting a Swedish accent? And you've already taken that off the table. So here we are.
All right, we can check that off the list now.
Off the list. All right. So we should say right up front that Amy Poehler is the patron saint of this podcast,
Yes.
of our lives,
Yes.
of all of television,
Yes.
and probably of the entire world.
Yes.
So, with that baseline established, and her being prominently involved in the show, both as a producer and as making a cameo appearance in the first scene, Blair, what did you think of Welcome to Sweden?
So, Welcome to Sweden is a show. It's one of those things where, like Parks and Rec, kind of a rough start, rough first episode. That being said, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed how endearing it was, and how each character was silly but not obnoxious, and they weren't like abysmal characters like other characters we'll talk about from another show in a future podcast.
Yes. Future is in 10 minutes from now.
Right. But no, it was a well-developed world with really fun characters. It had some really funny punchlines, especially the uncle. Everything that the uncle did was hilarious.
We'll talk about him shortly.
Yes. And I just felt, and it felt a lot actually like a European comedy. It felt like a lot of the BBC comedies that I like to watch. Mm-hmm. It has a different timing than we usually have in America, and if you can appreciate sort of a slower paced comedy, then it might be right up your alley. But in general, I found it to be really endearing and really nice to watch.
Yeah, I think with comedies, you have to go in with the knowledge that in most cases, the first episode of a comedy is the worst episode the comedy ever does. That's just how it works. Because comedies need time to find their voices, and more practically, comedies aren't. The best comedies take advantage of the world that they live in, and having to establish that world in 20 minutes of screen time is an impossible task.
Yes.
And so what tends to happen, and what happened here, is that it goes overly broad, and you have a lot of very broad jokes that just sort of get the point across. Because I think comedies are very scared of, in the first episode, coming off as boring. So they go very broad with punchlines, they do a lot of physical bits, and we definitely saw that here.
Yes.
But like you said, I think that the baseline that we're dealing with here, the things that won't change, the characters, the actors, the tone, are all, if not home runs, then pretty close. I really enjoyed all the permanent aspects of this.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. And I've said this a lot in my writing on Show Ratings TV, and I've said this a lot on the podcasts that Kyle and I have done together, is the thing that's the most important to me as a viewer, or the two most important things, are characters that feel well-developed and true, and a world that I can believe in, even if it's a fantastical world. As we know, I like fantasy. Well, maybe you don't know. If you've listened to other podcasts, you know I like fantasy worlds. But as long as it's a world that I can believe in, and it's so thought out by the creators that the characters act seamlessly within it, then I'm going to enjoy it. And I felt like Welcome to Sweden was absolutely a home run in both of those regards.
And one of the things that, there's a lot of comedies and dramas and everything that have a sort of fish out of water setup, where our point of view character is getting tossed into a situation that he or she is not familiar with. That's a pretty common TV go-to, and that's certainly the case here. But it's almost, I had this sense watching this, and Greg Poehler is the creator and the star, and it's from his perspective as an American who's moved to Sweden rather suddenly. But because the show is shot in Sweden, and because the show is developed for Swedish TV, it's one of the only, this pilot was one of the only episodes of television I can remember where I felt like I was experiencing the same thing that the main character was experiencing.
Oh.
In that the setting looked so not like a soundstage in Los Angeles. I
Yeah.
mean, there were beautiful shots that you just couldn't get anywhere. I mean, like outdoor shots that you just don't see on American TV, and just the abundance of accents and just the way that everything looked a little different. The way that the sunlight shown in a way that doesn't seem that I don't see that often. Like it just felt different. And that's of course because the show was developed in Sweden for Swedish TV, but that's like it added to that fish out of water element to me because it really did feel like something different was happening in this.
I agree, and I think aesthetically, a comparison that I would like to make is in the way that you're talking about how things are clearly shot on location, and you get this sense of the world that you don't get to see a lot in American television.
Mhm.
Is it was kind of like a really funny indie movie, but
Yeah.
in a television series,
Yes.
like with an artist who has a clear creative vision,
Yeah.
who's able to express their cinematic point of view, but then also tell this kind of quirky, fun, fish out of water story. I mean, I think aesthetically that's probably the best way to describe it.
Absolutely, indie movie is exactly right because it did have even the plot is kind of an indie movie plot, like just the setup and it really did feel like a 20-minute indie film,
Yeah.
right? And it was sort of had a nice little bow at the end with their little conversation on the docks, and you can just tell that this show is capable of a lot of sweetness, and it also mines its comedy uh, from sort of the discomfort of being in a situation you're not comfortable in, but it doesn't push it to the point that it's uncomfortable for the viewer. Like I didn't feel cringy during this, even during the worst moments of
Yep.
this. It never felt like it was sort of attacking the viewers, sensibilities or challenging really the sensibilities of what's embarrassing and what's not. It seemed
And
pretty pleasant.
yeah, and I don't feel like it tried to insult the intelligence of the viewers either, which I think happens a lot with comedies on television
Mhm.
nowadays. And I don't think it didn't tell it easily. Obviously, it was created for Swedish television, but as an American viewer, there are lots of jokes that are made at the expense of groups of people. It's a very common type of comedy, and I didn't feel like Welcome to Sweden did that. It made jokes at the expense of the protagonist for things that are
Yes.
specific to him, not for him being an American. And it's so pleasant and so refreshing to see a comedy where the jokes are not hinged on insulting groups of people.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that's the key point here because I think a lot of people, if they read this premise on paper, are going to think that it's going to be a bunch of Sweden jokes. But the brilliance of this comedy and something that you can miss if you don't watch it closely is that Sweden is the normal in this comedy. This is
Mhm.
set in Sweden. This is not from an American setting laughing at how silly the Swedes are. This is from a Swedish setting laughing at how silly one American is.
Right, and it's
Yeah,
one American.
right.
It's not Americans. It is one.
Yes, he's not trying to represent all Americans. He's a guy, and we get some of his backstory, but it's not. It never makes an attempt to make fun of Americans as a group. It never it never feels like it's making any kind of commentary that's pointed, which is actually fits nicely with the sort of pleasant tone of the series. Like it's not like out to prove some kind of point or make some kind of sharp jokes about um, about culture so far at least.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But
No,
I like that.
yeah, me too. No,
Okay.
I have nothing bad to say. I think really quickly we wanted to touch on the uncle
I was gonna
character.
bring him up because that guy right off the bat has potential to do a lot of things, a lot of things.
Yes. So in this pilot, there was an uncle character to the girlfriend. I actually don't. I will say, unfortunately, that one of the issues I did have is I can't retain any character names from the show. There are some shows where I can in the pilot, but not with this one. But the uncle character is obsessed. He owns a video store and he's obsessed with American movies, but only to a certain period of time.
Yes.
And he shows up initially dressed in the most ridiculous, like the type of thing that a hillbilly might wear on the 4th of July.
Yes.
And he just goes on to tell a bunch of really funny American jokes that again they're not at the expense of Americans.
No, it's cute.
Yeah.
It's cute. You know, he loves America genuinely, and he loves American culture.
Yes.
And so he's dressed himself up to reflect his love of American culture, and it's very funny and very cute, and having a character that genuine is always nice, you know, because he wasn't doing it sarcastically, he wasn't doing it, you know, to make fun of anybody. He just loves American culture and movies from the 70s.
Yep.
And oh, you go.
No, you go.
Okay, on character names, they did have one of the characters I know is named. His name isn't Burger, but the American guy pronounced it Burger because they did the Burger King joke early on. and the lead's name is Bruce. So those were the two names that I got.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I just think there's a lot of promise when you have a pilot that sets up this kind of world with these characters and a tone where it's not looking to make you uncomfortable or like live on the edge in terms of like telling really like racy jokes or anything. Like this is just a world that people live in. It made me laugh. I enjoyed it.
I did too, and yeah, I would highly recommend it. I do think, unfortunately, it probably won't play very well with an American audience, just because apparently we like insulting television.
Yes.
But I do hope that it succeeds, and if it is on in Sweden and it doesn't succeed here, I know that I probably will be watching the entire series.
Well, it was trending on Twitter tonight, which was a good sign.
That is a good sign.
That's a very good sign. For the American viewers, what are some comparisons of current shows on American TV, current or former shows, I guess, that people, if they like those shows, they might like this one?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I don't know if I'm the best person to ask that question. That are currently on television or that have been canceled?
Any shows that, like, if you were trying to place this to someone who's never heard of it before. And this is a particularly tough show to do that with because half of it is in Swedish with subtitles. So right off the bat, that's a weird. That's like no other show is a good comp for that. But
it's interesting. I said before, it has a very BBC feel with its comedy. Like, it definitely was nothing like Spaced, which is the show that Simon Pegg and Nick Frost did with Edgar Wright in their 20s in the early 2000s. Like, it's in content-wise, it's nothing like that. But I would say, like, the way that I felt about the characters and the entertainment value and, like, you know, exploring some foreign concepts to the audience and like having a character come in and learn those concepts, I think Spaced is a weirdly appropriate comparison. I could be totally wrong on that one, but like the timing of it, the pace of the jokes, obviously it doesn't have the Edgar Wright editing style, which is sort of wacky, but like, but just how endearing the show was. I don't know if you've ever watched Spaced.
No, I've never watched it, but I do think a BBC comedy is a good comparison. I don't know which one, but it doesn't play exactly like an American comedy. That said, I do think the aspect of it where it's not, the jokes aren't really at anyone's. I mean, the jokes are at people's expense, but it's not like a referendum on the character or something like. No one's being attacked.
Right.
In the same way that I think Parks sets up that sort of same thing where you're kind of rooting for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a feel good NBC single camera comedy, and I think that is very likely what Amy Poehler brought to the project.
Yes.
This sort of idea that no one's the bad guy. You know, even people within the world of the show, like the mother, who's, you know, clearly very critical of our protagonist, she's not the bad guy. You know, she's just someone who has a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's fairly rare in comedies still, but this definitely has that same sort of feel-good setup.
Yeah, I would give it sort of a season 2 Parks and Rec, not season 1. Season 1 I think was at the expense of Leslie Knope character.
That was more like The Office.
Yeah.
Season 1, where Leslie Knope was Michael Scott, and then season 2 it softened. And yeah, I think you're right. Post season 1 Parks and Rec.
Yes.
All right, so Blair, final rating: thumbs up or thumbs down for Welcome to Sweden?
thumbs up, and given the opportunity, I will binge watch the heck out of this show.
Absolutely. I'm giving it a thumbs up, and I'm sticking with it, and hopefully the ratings are good to allow me to stick with it. All right. Well, thank you for guesting, Blair. How can people keep up with you?
People can follow me on Twitter at BlairLovesTV, and Blair is spelled Blaire.
Always.
Yes, not like the Blair Witch Project, but with an E.
Oh, it's pretty confusing.
I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And you can also check out my reviews on showratings.tv. This season, I am currently reviewing True Blood, and also they can catch both you and I hosting the Strain podcast.
Absolutely.
This season, which is at the Strain Pod on Twitter.
Yes, please check us out. The Strain podcast on iTunes and on Twitter, and yeah. It's going to be fun. Very different show than Welcome to Sweden.
Very different show.
All right, so that concludes this episode of the ShowRatings.tv Pilot Roundtable. We invite you to check out this and other Southgate Media Group podcasts at southgatemediagroup.com, and to read about, rate, and discuss all your favorite shows at ShowRatings.tv. You can follow me on Twitter at KyleLovesTV, Blair at BlairLovesTV, and ShowRatings at ShowRatingsTV. Until next time, this has been Kyle Tremblay. Thanks for listening.